We started talking one day and she started talking about financial abuse. And I'm like, what is that? Like, I didn't know this language. I've been financially abused my whole life. I didn't know this language. I'd never even heard this term. But her and I started talking. She's like, yeah, I wrote some books about it. And I'd really like to help other people in this situation, but I don't know how. I'm like, okay. Well, then we started talking more. And we started looking at the possibilities, like as I understood that this is a form of domestic violence. And domestic violence, I'm very familiar with, not in ways that I want to recall, but I've been down I've had some bad experiences. And we started talking more and more. And we started talking about why people stay.
Hi, Kat. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me and going through what I believe is a very inspiring and motivating conversation and story. How are you?
I'm good this morning. It's sunny here and I can feel spring in the air. So it's nice to have that cold snap finally gone for the season. So
Yeah, it was quite a winter.
it was an
Um,
interesting one for sure.
yes, yes. And then also being in Florida, we did have some snow, which it was kind of
Oh,
crazy.
yeah, we had snow here in South Texas too. And they tell us
Different.
it's unheard of, but we're originally from Seattle. So of course we probably just brought it all with us.
So we're gonna go ahead and dive right into if we take all your achievement and being an author and advocate, who is that?
Oh my. Okay. Let's see. At 16, no, let's start a little bit earlier. At 9 years old, I was a gymnast. Absolutely loved it. Terrified of the balance beam. And then eventually I had to stop because I had a bad knee. Forward about 7 years and I discovered track. Absolutely loved running. Was really good at it. And for some reason, my knee never bothered me when I was running. So, but it did bother me as a gymnast. So I was outspoken, outgoing. I could make friends with anybody or anything. At 19 years old, I had a car accident, flipped my car half a mile down the road, had to be airlifted out of the Rockies, walked away with a little tiny scratch on my neck or on my knee, sorry. And all of my childhood memories gone. According to my mother, my personality changed at that point. Something actually happened in my head, and I became more quiet, more reserved. I grew up around horses and cattle, used to love to ride horses, trained them up until I was about 25. And then from there, I was about 25 when I had my first kid. I was a single mom for a long time. That was a challenge. So that little girl is now 26 years old. She's a mathematician and she's running overseas business and doing fantastic.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. Then I met my husband for the second time. The first time was a really interesting story that I will not dive into here, the whole Jerry Springer thing. But because of the brain injury, I forgot him. Like after I left the state, I forgot he even existed for about 13 years until he found me again. And one conversation, I knew I was going to marry the man. We got married. We had a couple more kids. About 2 years ago, he broke his leg, threw our life into complete turmoil. Not him, but just, the incident. And then he and his company ended up shifting him down to Texas out of Seattle. And so here we are. We went from in the city to a 300-acre cattle farm. It has been so healing to be able to walk outside and not feel every neighbor's eyes upon me, to see cattle just meandering by. We actually have a little sheep in the cow herd now. Nobody knows where she came from, but she got stuck in one of the fences and now thinks she's a cow. I have 9 dogs because my youngest had pups on Christmas Eve. So we've got 5 little 9-week-old piranhas that are running around and causing chaos. I've got about 40 chickens and 5 ducks. There are egg layers, so I never have to buy eggs again, which is absolutely fantastic, especially seeing what's going on out there in the world. And they are so cuddly. I can go downstairs and just have chickens crawl on my lap, and it's like this deep breath of fresh air to just kind of, cuddle a bird. And coming to this space, we were very fortunate, very lucky, I guess, in a way. It just kind of, it was a door that opened that we weren't anticipating. But after years of chaos in our family and our household and trying to just barely maintain. I mean, I always think of that image where somebody's holding onto a desk going, please make it stop, please make it stop. But now we're finally here and it feels like a rest stop where we can just take a deep breath, kind of reassess and go, okay, we know what we want. We've somehow gone down every wrong path. How can we get this space, but have it be ours and not, living on somebody else's land? But yeah, so it's been, so basically I'm kind of a somebody who gets tugged through life sometimes. And I think I finally just got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I've done all of these little things, but I feel like I'm always doing them for everybody else, for a boyfriend, for a husband, for kids, for family. What does Kat want? And when I started asking myself that question, what do I want? What happens if I stop putting everybody else first and I put myself first just for 5 minutes? Just put myself first. What do I want? And that's when a lot of things started changing. That's when a lot of my life started feeling like it was going in a more positive direction. So, but even when you take away all that, honestly, at the end of the day, I'm somebody that can walk outside with a shotgun and, be tracking a predator going, please stay away from my birds. I don't like to shoot, but, I do have to protect the animals. I'm somebody who can hop on the back of a horse. I can walk through the woods by myself, be completely at peace. I'm somebody who loves to curl up with a good book. I'm reading one right now that's absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to have a conversation with the author. I am somebody that was isolated for so long that I have found my peace in isolation. And I know in a way that's a trauma response, but it's also my safe place. So
it seems and I gotta say that I can see where part of your story, it's a little bit sad, but then when you started talking about where you're at right now, your face lights up. You are in a good place, and definitely those boundaries are much needed for your life with everybody else. What do you say was like the pivotal moment? Without going too much in detail, it's up to you. What do you feel that it was and how you were able to? Okay, so for example, like when I got to that place, I had to kind of put boundaries on my own kids. They didn't take that lightly, and it was a struggle. So, what was that pivotal moment for you, and how were you able to work through it?
So I've had a couple of those pivotal moments. The first one was when I was 19. I was still, the way I was raised, I was kind of raised in a pseudo cultish environment. So everything that I was taught about the world, I discovered later was a lie. Everything that I had endured as a kid, because I wanted to run away at 15. Then I realized like all the, the running away was really not going to benefit me in any way. So I ended up staying. But then I remember at 19 years old, I hugged my brother and I said, I can't protect you anymore. I have to leave. I'm not safe in this house. And so that was sort of the first turning point. And it was leaving my childhood home and leaving this family that I was so tied into so tightly that sort of gave me a chance to breathe and start reassessing and go, okay, wait a minute. I was taught this one narrow viewpoint, but there's like this whole colorful, beautiful world out there with all these different viewpoints. Why is this one right? And so I started asking myself that question. And then the second time it happened, I was a new single mom. I had just moved to Seattle and I had an 8-month-old girl. And I had no family around me when I had her. I was very fortunate to have a couple friends that were like family and they really helped me out. But most of my family just gave me the middle finger and said, oh, you did such a horrible thing. And it's like, no, I didn't. Didn't do anything terrible. I had a baby. And but my mother left my father around that time, and it was a whole big fiasco. But she didn't understand boundaries. She didn't understand that my daughter is my daughter, not her daughter. And so she sort of walked around for a while with this attitude of, I have two daughters. And I finally had to, she used to barge into my house. I'd be on a date. I couldn't go anywhere. So they'd come over and we'd hang out and watch TV. And she would barge into the house and then she'd start giving me the third degree. And I'm just like, what? This is my home. Like, don't do that. So I spent a couple years having to really set boundaries for her. And during that time, I had sort of unraveled all of the lies and the threads and the belief systems that were sort of pushed on me as a child. And I had to completely go to ground zero and go, okay, who am I? Like, without all of these things, who is this person that's in the middle of all this? And that was a very hard journey because I got a lot of backlash from my family. I got a lot of backlash from people I knew. Everybody wanted me to be back in this little box, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I wasn't that person. And then the third time it happened was actually quite recent. We're on a farm now. I've got all these birds, I've got all these animals, and I have spent, since my two youngest were born, I have been a worker, I've been a writer, I've been a mother, I've been a housekeeper, I've been a cook, I've been everybody's everything all the time. And when COVID hit, it was right at that point where my youngest, was 5. And I thought, okay, now I can have 2 kids in school. I get a few hours of my day back. And that just blew it all out of the water. He had to do kindergarten right there. And my daughter had to do a class right there. And I was like, suddenly I had 3 times more work to do. And so it's kind of been this journey of slowly over the last decade going, okay, you can do this. I'm not going to do it anymore. But really since we moved to Texas, because now I've got so many animals that I'm taking care of on top of the family and everybody else. And I finally went, you know what? I'm never going to move forward. I'm never going to be able to do the things that I want to do if I don't put my foot down and say, I love you all, but you got 2 hands, you got 2 legs, you can do it your damn self. I don't need to do it anymore. If you got dirty clothes, go use the damn washer. If you're hungry, there's a fridge full of food. I am not cooking for you. And it's now turned into, if I'm hungry, I go cook for myself. Sometimes I'll still cook dinner for everybody. I try to do that at least once or twice a week. They're still my family. I love them, but my kids are growing up. I've been a mom for 26 years and I'm kind of tired of being the center of everybody's world. I want to sort of untangle all those threads and say, I love you, but I'm my own independent person now. I want to be the center of my own world. And then what I give, I want it to be because I want to give, not because everybody's taking. So, sorry.
That's oh my goodness, that is truly inspiring. Just it's very hard to become that person where it's new because you always cater to people, but you're so tired you can't do it, and you know that it shouldn't be like that because they can do it themselves. But I've been in that situation, so I kind of was hearing you and getting a little bit emotional because even though as bad as you felt, right now I'm pretty sure that you're like glad that you did it, because now you're able to breathe a little bit better. You're able to enjoy life a little bit better as well.
And I need the chance to be able to enjoy life, to not wake up in the morning and go, okay, I need to spend 2 hours on the animals. And then I need to spend, 4 hours dealing with my kids. And then I need to do the schooling because we're homeschooling now. That's a whole other basket. It's my days at one point in my life, my days were so chaotic that I had a whole schedule for every single day broken down into 15-minute increments. And I would cry my way through it every day because it was the only way I could keep my head up. And at this point in my life, things were so bad, I couldn't write. at all. And writing is my escape. Writing is sort of that thing that reminds me that guess what? I'm a human too. You know, I don't need to be everybody else's sort of phrase. I don't need to have pieces constantly taken from me if I can't, if I don't even know what's underneath.
Right, right. I completely get it. Right now, I protect my peace as much as I can, because it's very similar to I've been the center of other people's attention and world. Um, and a lot has been put in my plate that does not belong in my plate. Um, and even last week, it was a very, I think it was kind of like a reminder. Stop saying it so much and start doing it. Like, stop saying that you protect your peace and start protecting your peace. And it just came to a different level where I have to say, everybody stop. And
Yeah.
I didn't say anything and I just left just to get mental clarity. So I completely understand. I completely understand that journey. So it seems like a lot has happened. It being 19 or even 15 to now, where did you are an author? So where did that come from? Like, where did it start?
That's an interesting story because when I was little, I loved to read. But what I loved was I loved Mercedes Lackey. I loved Andre Norton. Her book Iron Cage was literally one of my favorites as a kid. And it's what's interesting is as a kid, these were just authors that I knew. You know, I hear a lot of authors talk about that they were always fed the same stories, the same 10 authors that were kind of famous throughout history. And I look back and I'm like, I always ended up picking up women authors, but they were always the really deep, dark, dragon world, science fiction world. 9 years old, I'm in bed reading, trying to read, and my father's like, "Oh, we got to have family time." And so he dragged me out of my room and make me sit in the living room watching his show that I hated. He always watched like military shows um, or cop shows. And it's like, I'm a little done. But all I wanted to do was go back and just read, And then we had this local library, and it was so cool. They had this whole wall that was all these like bright orange, just horrible ice scarring orange couches. But we would go there, and I would grab a book off a shelf or two, and then like go sit on these couches for an hour and just read. And it was one of my most favorite places. Um, and then by the time I was 19, I was so busy things about to read occasionally. And when I read, it was always going to like a secondhand store or Barnes and Noble or somewhere where I could, okay, what's out there? What science fiction is really like, you're always looking for that one book, the one that you open it up and you cannot put it down and it absolutely takes over your world. So I was always looking for that book. And I think I must have been mid to late 20s. And I walked into this little secondhand shop, and there was maybe 50 books there. They were all different. Most of them were like RPG game books or military science fiction. And then it was, George R. R. Martin or Tolkien. And that was the breadth of the fantasy world or fantasy books. So I'm like, I really want something different. So I found this little book, and the cover doesn't give any clue to what actually goes on in the story. It looks more like this tech cyberpunk type of cover. It's called The Eyes of Light and Darkness by Ivan Cat. And it is about it's an alien planet that humans have come to. And they've got these huge, like Mayan and Olmec pyramids all over the planet that are part of the native population that they're calling fuzzies. But as they go deeper into this alien lore, what they find out is that it starts to get disjointed and it starts to sound almost childish. It's almost like they're devolving and they can't figure it out. And then all of a sudden, there's like I think there's a word, and I'm not going to get the wording right, but it's almost like follow the road. And that's the last thing that's ever written on their pyramids. And then like their whole civilization crashes into this very archaic clans. And it's like they lost all of their intelligence, they lost all of their culture. And as you go through this story, it's a thriller. It actually takes place on a mining base up in the asteroid belt, and they start finding these mechanics, these rocks that are shaped like wrenches, that are shaped like gears. And it's a colony ship, and it's a human colony ship, but it's been abducted by this other alien species that's actually responsible for the de-evolution of the native population. And it's such a fascinating, beautiful, thrilling story. I just couldn't put it down. So as that happened, and I kept, I kind of got excited about science fiction again. I was slowing down in life and just kind of, raising a daughter and doing the 9 to 5 thing. But I started trying to look for more books and I couldn't find any. So I remember one day I was just done being an office person, and I went, you know what, fuck it, quit my job. I went back to school, and somewhere in there I started writing again. But I thought, what would it be like to create my own world? So I started creating this fantasy world. I didn't have any characters in there because I didn't know how to write a character to save my life, but I loved creating the world. I loved creating the language. I loved just building something that was mine. And I didn't even think about writing a book. I just wanted to build something that was mine. I was thinking I might just do it like an RPG or whatever. And so I did start playing RPG for a while. It was just handwriting in a forum. You just kind of build stories with other people, a couple lines at a time. But then I kind of outgrew it. And then one day I was like, you know what? I've got all these wonderful characters I've created. I've got this beautiful world I've created. What happens if I throw them all together? And there we go. I now have, well, Bud Flower's out. I've got a couple of short stories around it. But if you look in my files, I actually have like at least 30 books that are in some form of written or planned, and they all end up tying back to this one world that I created. So anyway, that's my very long story.
No, that's amazing. You know how the journey gets you into what you're supposed to be doing. So it started from reading to just writing a little bit of something just because you wanted to write about this world you created, and then look where that led.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. And honestly, for a long time, I felt like I was just sort of screaming into the nothingness. I had written these books, I was doing all the contests, and then I had this wonderful author or editor friend one day. Her and I were having a conversation, and she goes, Kat, I love you. You know this, right? And I'm like, yes, I know. And she goes, you're not a commercial writer. And I had to sit on that for a while. I'm like, what? What do you mean I'm not a commercial writer? But I started thinking about it, and she was right. I don't write. When I look at the literature that's out there, what I write is very niche. It's very dark. It's like one part of the spectrum of science fiction and fantasy. It's second world, it's deep lore, it's, constructed languages. It's something that's a little off the beaten path from the standard of what you would find in most bookstores. And so when she said me that, I was like, it was like all the neurons lit up in my brain, and I went, that's why I'm spinning my wheels.
And then from an author, you're also an advocate for
Mm.
I Know Why She Stayed. Can you share a little bit about the organization and how you got connected? You are the co-founder, if I'm not mistaken. So tell me about that journey.
Okay, so the start is actually kind of fun. I was on a game show called Word Crash. The first time, I don't remember who my co-participant was, and I really wish I did. It's done by this lovely woman named Megan Alnico. She runs the whole thing. But the second time I was on, I ended up getting paired against Casey Rogers, who is the other co-founder of I Know Why She Stayed. And her and I had the funnest time just joking back and forth. And a few days after we got off the game show, I got an email from her. And she's like, I found your website. I saw your artwork. I saw your book covers. I want you to design my book cover. And I'm like, you're right, and I kind of looked her up and I'm like, you write women's fiction. I don't know that I could design a women's fiction cover. Because at the time I was still struggling with, am I really an artist? Am I not an artist? It was kind of that weird phase you go through. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. So I started designing her cover, and it was outside of my norm, so it was a nice fun challenge at the same time, but I still got to apply sort of the techniques that I do. And her and I started talking more and more. We talked back and forth, and then we started talking deeper. And at this time, my life was already starting, it was already in a bit of a spiral. My husband hadn't broken his leg yet, but it was starting to spiral in other ways, and COVID hitting and all that. But we started talking one day, and she started talking about financial abuse. And I'm like, what is that? Like, I didn't know this language. I've been financially abused my whole life. I didn't know this language. I'd never even heard this term. But her and I started talking. She's like, yeah, I wrote some books about it, and I'd really like to help other people in this situation, but I don't know how. I'm like, okay. Well, then we started talking more, and we started looking at the possibilities, like, as I understood that this is a form of domestic violence, and domestic violence I'm very familiar with. Not in ways that I want to recall, but I've been down I've had some bad experiences. And we started talking more and more. And we started talking about why people stay. And I don't even remember where the phrase come from. I think she had it written down somewhere, and she's like, oh, this is garbage. And I looked at it and I'm like, my marketing brain went on, because I also do some marketing work for a company in Seattle. They're one of my wonderful, wonderful clients. And I was looking at it and I'm like, this is a fucking brilliant line. Like, I looked at it and I know why she stayed. When you've been through it and you read that, we've had women in tears when they just looking at the line. Casey has been in London and Germany. She's had people come up to her and hug her and go, I saw your postcard. I know you're safe, But we kind of went down this rabbit hole of really talking about our experiences and what she wanted to do, and my skill set and her skill set. And I'm like, I've been looking for something to advocate for a long time. But with the world on fire all the time, it always feels like there's 500 different fights going on, and everybody's screaming at you that you have to be part of their fight or you're the enemy. And I've never bought into that, because I'm like, no, there's too many fights. We live in a villain's world. And I hate saying that, but if you really, really go down the rabbit hole of what happens to people out there, not just in the US, it's a global issue. Women have suffered violence for so long, and they are trapped in these systems that keep them in the violence because they can't get out of it. And the more we talked about it, the more we realized it's all down to one thing. It's because of money. We don't have the money to escape. We don't have the money to walk out of a bad marriage and set up our own apartment and get food in and make sure our dogs and our kids and our family is safe from this threat. Whether it's a husband, it's a father, it's a grandfather, it could be a caretaker. If you're in your 80s and you've got no one, you have to rely on this caretaker, and you don't know if they're taking advantage of, maybe you've got everything that you've saved up. Maybe they're slowly siphoning it away. Women stay because they have to. And that's the root of our organization, is we know why you stay. We know the money's not there. We know that you've been taught these lies about yourself, and you might see yourself as, you might look in the mirror and see the monster, but you're not the monster. Somebody else is convincing you that there's a monster there, and you just have to pull away the mask and see the real beauty. So our organization, Casey had written a memoir and she asked me to write one as well. And so we co-authored a book. I kind of brought supplies today. So we co-authored a book called I Know Why She Stayed. A lot of it is her story, and it's about her and her husband and what her husband forced her to endure for many years. The thing that sticks out to me is her husband at one point said, I refuse to get life insurance. I don't want you and the kids profiting from my death. I mean, if that isn't financial abuse, like in bright neons. My story starts kind of the day that my husband broke his leg and how the chaos in our life sort of went to nuclear levels, but it narrows in on I got a full ride scholarship to a 4-year college because I was a damn fucking good runner. I was really good. I had won state medals in 2 different states. 17 years old. I didn't know any better. My father forced me to sign a bunch of paperwork and he took away my scholarship, told the college that I wasn't allowed to have it, and he forced me to go to a university that I couldn't afford. So I went from having my entire education paid for to I had $10,000 in loans that it took me decades to pay back. As a matter of fact, I don't think I ever did pay it back. I think they finally just took all of it out of my taxes and said, gave me the middle finger. I ended up failing out of that college because the classes were so big that, I mean, when you walk into a class with 400 or 500 students, you're not important. You have to already know who you are and you already have to want that education. I wanted to be a runner. I was willing to do the education to be a runner. So that was my story. And then we wrote a reader's guide to go along with it. And the reader's guide sort of dives into the psychology of what happened in our stories. And so, here's where her husband was being a narcissist. Here's where my father was, being financially abusive. And it kind of looks at everything through the lens of how psychology is today, how psychiatry is today, these mental health issues that are coming out of all of these very oppressive systems and how they're fueling how families view us. Oh, you don't need to leave him. He's a good man. He's never done anything, he's so charming. Yeah, well, you don't see what happens when the door closes, mom. You don't see the fist going through the wall. You don't see the bruises on my stomach that I hide under my shirt, things like that. So it breaks down that it's not just the victim caught in an abuser's cycle. It's about family reinforcement and dynamics. It's about, all of these things in place that kind of force us to stay in these systems. We're working on the next 3 sections of our program. This is supposed to be an educational program. So the second one I'm working on right now, and it breaks down, it kind of goes through the passages again, focusing on the financial lens to help kind of remove the fear of money. Because I'll be honest, I'm the first person that's absolutely terrified of money. Terrified. But it breaks it down and it gives women a chance to explore these passages with their own experience and their own lens. Okay, Casey's husband refused to buy her a cell phone. Even though he had one, he refused to buy her one because she didn't need one. She wasn't important enough. So now these women that use our program, they can write down, how do you view this? What's your observation? When you reflect on this, how does it make you feel knowing that another woman had to suffer this? And then connecting the dots of, did anything similar in your life happening? Did it happen in the past? How did it make you feel knowing that guess what, this happened to you too? And then as it goes through the second portion of the program, it's kind of, okay, all these things happen to you. We're connecting, we're observing, we're reflecting. How do we confront this anger and turn it into a hope? Yeah, I'm angry. I'm so angry at the world that this happened, but how do I take that anger and go, okay, it happened. How do I let go of that anger, put it in the past, and take everything that I've learned and put it into creating art, creating music, creating these stories that are hopeful and bitter for other people? How do I take this and put it into helping another woman that's out there? I have 2 nieces right now. I just found out are 16 and 17 years old. They're still trapped in a cult. I knew that they were in this particular cult. They're married to 40-something-year-old men. They're little girls. I got to get them out, you know? So there's women like that all over the world. It's happening to us, it's happening to our daughters. Our third pillar goes into tips, techniques, tricks. How do you build a self care kit so you can learn how to start taking care of yourself, start setting those boundaries, set those goals? What do you want when everybody else is taken away? What do you want as a woman, as somebody who's been hurt? And then the fourth pillar, Justine has been built this beautiful resource guide. And it's local resources, state resources, national resources, and resources around the globe so that at some point in the future, we can take all of this, we can translate it, find resources for Kyrgyzstan, take it into Kyrgyzstan for the women there. Kyrgyzstan's a country where bride napping is part of their culture. Kidnap and basically force girls into marriage. You know, in China, they've got a different culture. In Canada, they've got, you know, they're similar to the US, but they've got a different, but it's the domestic violence is everywhere. Depending on where you are, the resources are different, and sometimes they're even more limited than what we have endured. So our goal is to put all of those programs onto this. It's a pen and it has a hidden USB drive, and it's got the entire program. It's got the book, the reader's guide, everything on it. And our goal is to raise enough money that we can start sending these out into the universe, put them into fire stations, shelters, hospitals, doctors' offices, hairstylists. So when you see somebody who's hurting and you know they're hurting and they may not even recognize that they're being abused yet, you can give them one of these. And when they're ready, they can take that program, they can read the book, they can start working through the program, they can start figuring out, I'm not in a good relationship. No wonder I've been unhappy for so many years. No wonder I feel like all the threads of anything that I am are just being pulled away. And they can go through it themselves. They can learn tips and tricks to help themselves to hide money in a tampon container, you know, hide money wherever you need to, get enough. We want resources to where if you can't keep your animals safe, we can get them into shelters, not kill shelters, but places that are safe. I have 2 acres out there. I could put a horse out there if somebody was in desperate need and they needed to board a horse for a while. But there's women need these resources. They need to know that those basic necessities that you just food, housing, safety for your kids, they need to know that that's out there. And that's what we're building. We're building a program to help them understand that they're abused, to help them start finding ways to get themselves out of it, and to hook them up with all those resources. Because a lot of shelters are wonderful places, but they're not, they deal with the aftermath when everything has already exploded, you know, and a lot of times they can't take people. There was a woman who lived in her car for 3 weeks, and the shelter called her, oh, good news, we've got help for you. And she got there and they gave her $10. They didn't even give her a place to sleep. So yeah, we are now on a mission. Casey and I found it. I know why she stayed. We are a safe haven, and we will strive to be a safe haven for as long as we can. Our program isn't fully finished yet. It's still in production, but the first pillar is done, the book and the reader's guide. If someone's in need and they're in the place where they know and they're desperate to get out and they want to start getting help, send them a free copy, you know, as long as we can. As long as either we can fund it or we can have sponsors to help fund us. We are going to get this information out there, and we are going to translate it into as many languages as we can, and we're going to start getting this in the world. And so it's not just the US, it's every country. Every woman can feel like they are not just part of a male fantasy video game where they can do whatever they want. They are a real human. They are a real person with hopes and dreams, that we want them to discover that again. We want those artists, those creators to come out from behind the veils, come out from behind their defenses and find a safe haven.
Thank you so much for everything that you and Casey and the team is doing. That's just amazing. I like where you have you ladies wrote the book. but you provided a guide because a lot of women do not know what's happening.
Yeah.
And and the guy uses kind of like, well, this happened to Casey, and this show how her husband was this way.
Yeah.
Like you said, he showed narcissistic patterns or when and that helps very much because even for me, like I mentioned to you, once I saw that name, I knew who you ladies were advocating for. And I was just so thankful that at least I don't have to explain myself why I stay, because you
Never.
ladies know. And the name it is a fantastic phrase. Like I'm getting goosebumps right now again.
It's really
So
brilliant. Yeah, we don't
yeah,
want
so
any. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Kat.
I was going to say, we don't want anybody to ever feel like they have to explain why they spent years in a relationship. And we also understand that sometimes we're just not awake yet. We just don't see it. And what's interesting about that is because I didn't see it for a long time. I didn't see that I was in this random cycle of bad relationship after another and couldn't understand why I couldn't find the one. But it was because when I met decent men that were good people that actually had genuine spirits and caring hearts, they freaked me out because they weren't abusive. And I didn't know how to be in a non abusive relationship. But, if there's women out there that are in it, if somebody tells you, oh, why don't you just leave? Don't explain it to them. They'll figure it out. You don't need to educate them because you know why you're there. You know that as bad as it is, that may be the safest place for now. But we want to
Yeah,
get you from that safe place that's still bad to a better safe place where you can take that deep breath, you know, where you don't feel like every time you make a decision that you're getting judged for it, that you're being told that you did it wrong, that you're being told that you're bad, or all of the labels that abusers like to put on their victims. It's
yes,
not,
no,
yeah, we want women to know, and men, because this happens to, it doesn't just happen to women. The statistics are very
yes.
high against women. Yes, the violence is mostly against women, but there are non-binary folks, there are trans folks, there are men out there. All of us, if you know, you know. If you see it,
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you for explaining. I don't think sometimes we go deeper into explaining a lot. I have one of the ladies in our team in the Fearless Women team that she said we need to talk about. She just said this last year, I believe. We need to start talking more about financial abuse. And I was like, I was taken a step back because I never heard about financial abuse until she mentioned it. And then, like, I looked it up and you know, I see how it is something. And sometimes, you don't see it because you're not educated in it. So, um, thank you so much for explaining. Because, and also, too, that sometimes domestic abuse or actually financial abuse doesn't have to be just your spouse or partner. It can be your parents, you
it can be
know.
your parents, it can be your caretaker, it can be your government.
Mm,
And let that one
wow,
sit for a minute.
yes.
We are in an
Woo.
abusive relationship. We have been in one for a very long time. And the interesting thing, there's this woman, Daniela Mestenek, I think she wrote a book called Uncultured. And I love listening to her because she talks about, she was in a very famous cult, and her book talks about like getting out of that cult and how getting out of that system, it's a cost to go in, but it's a bigger cost to get out. And I find the same thing with domestic abuse. It's a cost to go in because you do start losing your identity. You do start losing your freedom. There's certain things that you lose, but when you have to get out, the cost is exponentially larger. And so I think you have to know the language. You have to be ready to pay that price, and it sucks. It shouldn't have to be that way. You should be able to walk out of your house and through the doors of some safe haven and just breathe and take the time that you need. But that's not the way that it always goes. There's stalking. There's, sometimes women are in more danger when they try to leave.
Is there anything that you probably wanted to say, anybody that might be watching that is going through either domestic abuse or financial abuse? Anything that maybe you did not share previously? And also,
Yeah.
where can they find these resources?
First of all, if you're out there and you're feeling it, you're not alone. That's the one thing that all of us were isolated. And that's what abusers do. They isolate you from your friends, from your family, from the things you love. And then they make you feel like you're the problem. You're not. And you're not alone, because thousands of women go through this, and we're all isolated from each other, and the isolation is going to end. So we're finding each other again. So you just know that you're not alone, even if you can't reach out to us yet. When you can, we are at iknowwhyshe stayed.org. If you need a program, you let us know. We'll find a way to get one to you, either with the pen or online. If you can move safely online. If you can't, we'll figure out a way to get you a pen. So for anybody that's out there and is potentially a donor who would like to help, we are looking for donors. We're looking for sponsors. Everything goes into how can we get this information to women and do it in a safe way to where they can't have an abuser, their browser. We want them to be able to access the information in their way in a safe space. If you're a translator and you are just in love with what we're talking about and would like to help, we are always looking for ways to translate our materials into other languages. I live in Austin, so I'm actually my entire community is mostly Latina. Know that we need this in Spanish. We need it in French for Canadians, we need it in all these different languages. So if you're really interested in the language or helping to translate even just little bits, paragraphs, even if it's just in social media posts, we are so grateful, just so we can talk to other communities that we don't have access to. Yeah, I think that's it. You can contact me directly. I'm Kat at iknowwhyshe stayed.org. If you feel like you just need to hear a voice at the other end, we're here. So you're in a safe place.
Thank you so much for this interview. And throughout your story and everything that you said, it resonated with me in my heart and very emotional moments. This is on for some good. I can see why we were having technical difficulties. I'm getting goosebumps as I'm saying this. This is a message that needs to be sent out all over the world. So I hope that I can help with that.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing. I haven't spoken this raw about my experience in a while. So it was nice to kind of hopefully to reach somebody out there that needs it.